This show contains general information about legal matters. This information is not advice and should not be treated as such. If you have any specific questions about any legal matter, you should consult your attorney or other professional legal services provider. Be advised that while Cheapskate is a lawyer, he is not your lawyer. Also, Jimmy Franks is an idiot, and you should never take his advice.
You're listening to Song Crimes. I'm professional idiot Jimmy Franks, and along with real-life attorney Cheapskate, we explore the statements and confessions made by songwriters in popular music and pass judgment on those who choose to operate outside the law. Court is now in session. Welcome back to the new year. Cheapskate, I hope your holidays were pleasant.
They were.
So with us getting back into the new year, that means everybody's getting back to work, and this is a good time to take a look at occupational hazards and employment law. It's a new fiscal year. Let's review some policies, some best practices in the workplace. Well, it's not a workplace anymore, but it was for some people for a while. It's the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald from Gordon Lightfoot.
Church bell chimed till it rang 29 times for each man on the Edmund Fitzgerald.
And this is a song based on a true story, so a little bit of history coming alive. So this was a vessel that carried iron ore to smelter. Did it take on water and sink? It didn't break up like the Titanic.
Yeah, well, nobody knows. At least Gordon doesn't. He says they might have split up or they might have capsized. They might have broke deep and took water. And this being based on an actual shipwreck, it was easy enough for me to research. Just go to the Wikipedia page and see what happened. And the National Transportation Safety Board couldn't figure out exactly why it sank.
So we have like a Bermuda Triangle situation in the Great Lakes.
Kind of, sort of. There are a few different theories on why the ship went down. And that does get me into the first issue, which is who is in charge of investigating.
Right. Well, I would think it would be the NTSB, right?
Yeah. Now, the ship did go down on the Canadian side of Lake Superior, but it was a U.S.-flagged vessel. You have to be a U.S.-flagged vessel to carry anything directly from one U.S. port to another. That's why all the cruise ships have at least one stop outside the United States, because that means they don't have to use a U.S.-flagged vessel and U.S.-based crew. Because it was a U.S. flag vessel, the Americans investigated the wreck, and in this case, both the Coast Guard and the National Transportation Safety Board did investigations.
And neither of them were able to determine the cause. They just had theories.
Yeah, neither of them were able to come up with a conclusive reason why it sank.
So my question was, do the families of the crew have a civil case against the shipping line for what happened here?
They do. The problem, of course, is trying to figure out who or what was at fault. They would have to show during their case that the shipping line either intentionally did something wrong that resulted in people dying, or that they were negligent, that they didn't, essentially that they were careless. And given that neither the Coast Guard nor the NTSB were able to completely figure out what happened, if this case had gone to trial, probably what would have happened is the families would bring in some kind of maritime transportation expert to say, yes, here's the reason why I think the ship sank, here's the evidence that leads toward it, and this is evidence that points towards the shipping line being negligent, and then the shipping line would bring in their own expert. In this case, they settled out of court, so we never were treated to that spectacle.
Oh, man. So the mystery remains.
It does indeed.
It's like an X-File.
Yeah.
Oh, so then, one thing that I'm fascinated by is salvage operations. You hear these stories of people finding, jugs of gold coins that have been under sea forever. Now, this wreck was in 1975, so it probably doesn't have any timeless archaeological value.
No pirate gold here.
Maybe I want to recover some of that iron. When we find the wreck, if somebody comes along and spots the wreck, who owns it?
So when there is a shipwreck, the first thing you do is try and find the lawful owner and see if they still exist. If the shipwreck is like 200 years old, it may have belonged to a corporation that doesn't exist anymore. In that case, you can take any of the stuff on board and it belongs to you.
Okay.
But the Edmund Fitzgerald was actually owned by its insurance carrier, Northwestern Mutual. That's pretty common with large freighters. So if you dove the Fitzgerald, which is apparently really hard to do, and you took something from the wreck, that property would belong to Northwestern Mutual, and you could be charged with stealing Northwestern Mutual's stuff.
Okay, it's also probably haunted.
Well, yeah, I mean, you wouldn't want haunted iron ore when you can have the non-haunted variety.
It sounds like there's just not enough information to levy charges against the captain and crew, or the manufacturer of the boat.
Yeah, and if you could levy charges against the captain and crew, they're dead. So you can't very well bring them into court for anything. I mean, how would they be able to communicate with their lawyers?
I'm tired of letting people off on that technicality, though.
Well, I have heard tale of cases where there were murder-suicides, and the prosecution started talking seriously about prosecuting the dead guy to bring closure to the family. It's like, how would you do that? You're going to assign a public defender for a dead guy?
Well, let's come up with some charges here.
The most I can come up with would be for our hypothetical salvage diver could be charged with theft if they are taking stuff from the wreck. And then theoretically, if the people at the shipping line were horribly negligent, they could have been charged with manslaughter, but based on this information, we don't know.
Well, I sentenced Gordon Lightfoot to write a concept album of songs all about sunken ships, like the Achille Lauro, the Costa Concordia, cruise ships, other freight liners. I think that'd be just great, like a treasury of 12 songs all about sunken boats, so we can live that history again through music.
And given the often melancholy tone of Gordon Lightfoot's songs, I'm going to sentence him to spend a winter in Florida, get him away from the cold and the gloom of winters along the Great Lakes in Canada, get a new perspective on life.
If you're working for one of these companies, you feel a little nervous. There's been a lot of, I wouldn't even say accidents. There's been workplace casualties. So you might not be so motivated and want to tell your boss to take this job and shove it. That's what Johnny Paycheck did.
Take this job and shove it. I ain't working here no more.
And I want to find out more about the strategy of telling your boss to take this job and shove it. Is that okay? I mean, we're moving away from OSHA and into a different area of workplace law. Like, what are your rights as an employee? Is an employee obligated to give notice? Because Johnny Paycheck in the lyrics says, "You better not try to stand in my way because I'm walking out the door. Take this job and shove it. I ain't working here no more." Now, whether the foreman is trying to hold Johnny Paycheck against his will to continue working, it doesn't say that he's locked the door. So I'm assuming that he's not being held against his will. Johnny's free to go, right? Is he obligated to give notice, or can he just bail?
He can just bail. Almost never in the U.S. is somebody required to give notice before quitting their job. A few people have multi-year employment contracts, as opposed to most of us working stiffs who are at-will employees. We can start or stop work at any time. If you're on a multi-year contract and you quit before you're done, the company might be able to sue you for the cost of finding a new employee to replace you, but that's only if you're dealing with like a CEO. Johnny Paycheck and the rest of us, certainly not. And of course, they can't force him to keep going to work because that's slavery.
Okay, so he could be on the hook to pay back the company for whatever contractually obligated agreements that he made.
Very, very unlikely, though.
Okay, but maybe the cost of training or whatever, right?
Yeah, I strongly doubt it for the kind of job Johnny Paycheck would be holding, though.
Yeah, he probably doesn't have a non-compete clause for factory work. Oh, you can't go to work at another factory for another 18 months.
Yeah, well, I mean, this could be like Jimmy John's, non-competes for everybody.
What? Oh, tell me about that. I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, Jimmy John's has a non-compete clause for its sandwich makers in their contracts.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's not enforceable in many states, but in a few others it is.
Later in the song, because Johnny Paycheck, he's hot under the collar. He's angry at his foreman, throwing all kinds of insults around. He says, that foreman, he's a regular dog. The line boss, he's a fool. Got a brand new flat top haircut. Lord, he thinks he's cool. One of these days, I'm going to blow my top, and that sucker, he's going to pay. Now, is that a threat? Certainly not a great way to walk out of a job if you want to get a good reference. It's not quite. It's not on its face a threat, but it does feel threatening.
And it does say at this point he's saying one of these days he's gonna pay. So he's talking about a third party. Now, if he goes to the line boss and says one of these days you're gonna pay, the line boss might be in a situation where he could go and file for a restraining order, because that's starting to look like a threat against his safety. And of course, if the line boss gets a restraining order against Johnny Paycheck, Paycheck ain't coming back to work here. And of course, if the line boss wound up being beaten up very badly or found dead, Johnny Paycheck would be brought in for questioning right away.
But if Johnny Paycheck's going around to all of his buddies and saying, "Oh, I'm going to get him. I'm going to get that guy. He's going to pay," at some point that gets back to the line boss. Can he call the police and say or is that hearsay?
At this point, it's hearsay, and it's not a threat that's been directed at him by the guy anymore. There might be some states that would allow a restraining order based on this, but the majority of them, I don't think he would be able to get a restraining order unless Johnny Paycheck is mad enough and threatening enough that he actually comes up to the guy, or if Johnny Paycheck is holding a weapon when he says one of these days he's going to pay.
Okay, and then you got a note about this line. I've been working in this factory for nigh on 15 years. All this time I watched my woman drowning in a pool of tears. And I've seen a lot of good folks die that had a lot of bills to pay. What happens when you die with lots of bills to pay? Like, I would assume that you're no longer obligated to pay those bills, right?
Yeah, there is an order in which your debts get paid. Now, some of these folks might have had life insurance that paid it off or paid off a part of it. But the highest priority creditors upon somebody's death are the costs of burial and administering the estate. So the funeral home is going to get paid. Whoever is administering the estate is going to get paid. Then after that comes secured creditors, who are the people who have collateral. So if there is a mortgage, the bank will get their house back. If there's an auto loan, the bank will get the car back. After that comes government entities, so taxes and Medicaid is a huge one. If you are receiving Medicaid, the feds get to recover the amount of Medicaid spending against your estate. So a lot of estates disappear that way.
What?
Yes, that's true. So if you've got some older family members who have some money, talk to them about Medicaid planning. Refer them to an elder law attorney about that, because if they go into a nursing home, eventually the costs of the nursing home paid against Medicaid is going to eat up the inheritance unless you've planned for it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that is something worth talking about. And then, assuming there's any money left, it gets split between the unsecured creditors, who are people like credit cards, student loans, anybody else who hasn't taken collateral.
I learned a lot. Thank you. So the court recommends that Johnny Paycheck visit his local work source or job source program to help him find a vocation that's suited to his temperament.
And I would sentence Johnny Paycheck's employer to engage in some corporate team building. Maybe take the factory crew out to an escape room so they can work on building better relationships with each other.
Okay, we don't have any? There's no crime. There's no crime here. We're 0-2. This won't stand, Cheapskate. We've got to put somebody away.
Yeah, imagine the imaginary song crimes police commissioner pounding on the desk. You boys gotta bring me back something. The mayor's on my back.
I know you're a hanging judge, and you like to be able to put at least somebody away. So I'm digging into our vault here for a deep cut. This is a song from a band called the Buoys, called Timothy.
Timothy, Timothy, where on earth did you go?
And just fun fact, the Buoys featured a young Rupert Holmes, who later went on to write the song Escape, the Pina Colada song. But this song is about some miners that are trapped in a cave.
That's miners. We're not dealing.
That's right.
We're not doing juvenile law here.
No, right. So some miners, whether I'm assuming they're mining coal, maybe iron, I don't know. And I'm just going to read through some of the lyrics here. Trapped in a mine that had caved in, and everyone knows the only ones left were Joe and me and Tim. When they broke through to pull us free, the only ones left to tell the tale were Joe and me. Timothy, Timothy, where on earth did you go? Timothy, Timothy, God, why don't I know? Hungry as hell, no food to eat, and Joe said that he would sell his soul for just a piece of meat. Water enough to drink for two, and Joe said to me, I'll have a swig and there's some for you. I must have blacked out just around then, because the very next thing that I could see was the light of the day again. My stomach was as full as it could be, and nobody ever got around to finding Timothy. Cannibalism. What do we got? what are the workplace rules against eating your coworkers?
Right. So most states do not have cannibalism as a separate criminal offense. I live in one of the very few states that has a criminal offense of cannibalism. These guys are from Pennsylvania, where you would probably charge this as abuse of a corpse. Which is treating a corpse in a way that he knows would outrage ordinary family sensibilities. And that is a misdemeanor. That's assuming they found that Timothy died of natural causes and they ate him afterwards. Everybody in law school reads a case about a guy getting murdered to be eaten. It's called Regina Vs Dudley and Stevens. This is an English case. Two dudes in a shipwreck. They kill the third to drink his blood because they're running out of water. And their defense was, look, we had to. We were going to die. And the court's opinion on that is, well, no, not really. You could have just died. You didn't have to commit murder. This is like one of those ethical trolley problems.
Well, we'll link to that in the show notes too.
Yeah. Necessity, potential starvation is not a defense to cannibalism. So you could charge these guys either with murder or at the very least manslaughter.
Okay. It does suggest that Timothy was alive. In the very first line, it says, trapped in a mine that had caved in, and everyone knows the only ones left were Joe and me and Tim.
Right.
So it sounds like he's still around. Unless something happened when, in the narrator's fugue state where he blacks out, that the Tim passed away and Joe decided to dig in.
Yeah, and in our narrator's defense is mostly going to be, I don't remember what happened. I was not sane at the time.
Huh.
Yeah, insanity defense being either I didn't know what I was doing, I didn't have the ability to tell right from wrong at that time, or I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't control myself.
What if we brought in a hypnotist to get the narrator to uncover those memories that he's blocked out?
Ooh,
is that something that would hold up in court?
Probably not anymore. You may remember back in the 90s, there were a lot of sex abuse cases where people brought in hypnotists to help recover memories that ended up being extremely unreliable, that resulted in a lot of people going to jail for offenses they did not commit. So somebody might try it, but are going to get any competent defense attorney is going to really beat up that hypnotist on the stand when they come in to testify about their methods.
So do we have a confession here?
I don't think so. He's saying, I was hungry, and then when I woke up, I was on the surface, and I wasn't hungry.
I wasn't hungry. Timothy was gone. We don't know. He's playing it kind of coy, isn't it? Maybe he's he's proud he got away with it? Is this an OJ situation?
This is probably a guy who may be feigning temporary insanity to get out of something that he knew was wrong.
But one could make the case. Well, but there's no body. There's no habeas corpus. There's no evidence.
Yeah, you don't need one though. I mean, if he had been eaten though, you would think his bones would be there with teeth marks on them.
But nobody ever found him. So maybe they buried him deeper in the cave or in the mine.
Yeah, and you can definitely charge somebody with murder if they don't find the body. I mean, the defense attorney might try to argue that Timothy was still alive, but after a cave-in, that's not really a plausible argument to make. If I'm representing the narrator here, I'm going to try and dump all this on Joe.
Unless Joe cracks first.
Yeah, and Joe's attorney is going to blame the narrator for everything.
Okay. So what do we got? So in Pennsylvania, there's not it's not a crime to commit cannibalism.
Well, it's abuse of a corpse. It's not a separate.
Okay.
It's not a separate offense. Now, I will note that where I live, where cannibalism is a separate offense, they probably would not have been able to convict the narrator here because they created an affirmative defense that the action was taken under extreme life-threatening conditions as the only apparent means of survival. So everywhere else in the United States, this is probably illegal, but in the state where it is illegal to commit cannibalism, this might be legal.
So do we got him guilty or not guilty on abuse of a corpse? Can we say that he did it? We don't have him dead to rights. He doesn't just come out and say it. It's strongly suggested.
There is probably enough here to convict him of abuse of the corpse, at the very least, just from him not being hungry again when he's back on the surface.
Well, so we're going to find him guilty of cannibalism. So I sentence the members of the Buoys, the next time they head into work at the mine, to brown bag it. Bring a sack lunch. You know what? Bring an extra apple just in case you got to stay late, because you never know what's going to happen. You might get another cave-in, and it's just good to have food on hand.
And I am going to sentence the Buoys to work at the Alfred Packer Grill at the University of Colorado. It's their student union named after the only survivor of the Donner Party.
Let's break for lunch. And that was our episode. Thank you, Cheapskate.
Yep, thanks for having me.
And thanks to our announcer, Deb Slater. If there's a song you'd like us to feature, send your song ideas to songcrimes@gmail.com. If you like the songs you hear, you can buy them on iTunes or support your local independent music store, which is always a great way to discover new music. If you like the rest of the show, please subscribe, rate, review, and tell your friends about the show. And as always, don't do anything stupid. But if you do, keep your mouth shut. Court is adjourned.
Would you like to go undercover to fight discrimination? If so, you can become a fair housing tester. Find your local fair housing organization at nationalfairhousing.org.